Andy stood in the darkness, sharpening his senses on the deafening silence, pierced only by the whirlwind of wind dancing with the leaves. But in this silent void, he felt a presence, sinister and mysterious. He cautiously peeked out from behind the tree trunk and peered into the darkness. There, under the moonlight, loomed a silhouette, barely discernible but recognizable enough. Tall, gaunt, shrouded in fur. It moved forward slowly, soundlessly, droplets of blood from its hair resembling eerie stains on the canvas of a nightmare. Andy felt his pulse quicken as a branch snapped beneath his feet. The creature was close, dangerously close, and Andy knew it was time to run. He dashed forward, but instead of salvation, he heard a chilling cry that made him freeze in his tracks. He turned around and saw two bloody gleams approaching at deadly speed, and then he felt the icy touch of claws on his shoulder. Andy jolted awake, drenched in sweat. He sat on the edge of the bed, hunched over, his heart pounding in sync with the frenzied rhythm of the nightmare. He approached the window, drew back the curtains to peer into the darkness of the night. Across the expanse of the forest, opposite his house, stretched a shadow, twisting and turning, now disappearing, now reappearing. Was it just a spectre or a living creature? Or was it still the lingering remnants of a dream, tinted with bloody hues of terror? Ever since they moved to Chester, nightmares had haunted Andy. This small town seemed like a magnet for unknown horrors. The old, moss-covered buildings resembled abandoned castles more than homes. On the first night, he noticed a strange spectral presence at the window, but dismissed it as fatigue and imagination. But then the dreams began. Dreams of pursuit, of something sinister in the woods, of something waiting for you in the darkness. And when his classmates told him about the legend of the Chester monster, Andy felt the chilling truth pulling him deeper. The legend spoke of a creature, dragging its bloody path through the night, carrying people into its dark domains, where death came slowly and mercilessly. Suddenly, Andy felt that the world he lived in had become an awkward dream, and reality was just a drop of blood on his torn soul. Andy was a boy prone to anxieties, yet his fascination with horror and Stephen King's films was unwavering. It particularly struck a chord with him. Perhaps the only thing he wasn't afraid of was clowns, which made Pennywise seem less terrifying. But true terror for Andy lurked in the unknown, in the pitch-black darkness, where the mind conjured horrifying images, intensifying the fear. He lay on his bed, wrapped in his blanket, attempting to sleep. But sleep evaded him. Every time he closed his eyes, a monstrous figure from urban legends loomed before him. Abandoning his futile attempts to sleep, Andy simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. He reminisced about his first day at the new school. Andy started school a week late, so the beginning of the academic year wasn't as customary for him as it was for others. Not on September 4th*, but on the 11th. He had been at the new school for almost a month and a half, but hadn't found friends aside from one girl. Enid was a tall, beautiful girl with short white hair and brown eyes, hidden behind the plastic lenses of her round silver glasses. She approached him immediately after Miss Markham, their homeroom teacher, introduced the new Andy to the class. This gesture surprised Andy. In his hometown of Maine, when Andy transferred to a different class, his classmates seemed not to notice. But here, Enid was the first to come up and introduce herself. The alarm clock rang. Annoyed, Andy swatted at it to turn it off, then began to get ready for school. After a hurried breakfast, he dashed out of the house, nearly missing the school bus. He felt queasy on the bus, making the journey arduous for him. As he stepped off the bus and headed toward the school's main entrance, he felt the day promised to be dull. Enid had gone away with her parents for 2 days. This day was filled with the most boring and tiresome lessons, taught by equally uninspiring teachers. Additionally, there was an algebra test scheduled, a subject Andy struggled with. The academic year in the USA starts on the first Wednesday of September 4th, 2024. Andy was a creative soul, so subjects like algebra, chemistry, and physics were challenging for him, but he excelled at drawing. After the first lesson, as he sat in the school cafeteria, he didn't notice Eni joining him. Apologies for the mix-up. Here's the expanded and rephrased text. Hey there. Andy jumped at the unexpected greeting from the girl. Here we go, he thought, recognizing her voice. Straight to the point, as always. Wow, you look dreadful, she continued, seemingly oblivious to his surprise. Another sleepless night. Huh. No, I did sleep, but only for 3 hours. Andy waved it off. Why didn't you tell me you'd be back earlier? I wanted to surprise you, she said with a mysterious smile. Listen, I can't stand those bags under your eyes from lack of sleep anymore. Let's go to the woods tonight, and I'll prove that this Chester monster is just a myth. Are you out of your mind? Andy choked on his food. Firstly, how am I supposed to sneak out unnoticed? And secondly, I'm scared to go into the woods at night. Don't worry, I'll be with you, Eni reassured him. And about sneaking out, don't fret. You can tell your parents you're staying over at my place. Fine, I'll do it, just to get rid of the nightmares. Andy reluctantly agreed, sensing the trap closing in. Great. Grab a flashlight and... Eni didn't finish her sentence as the bell rang, signaling the end of the break. They had to head back to their respective classes. During the lesson, Miss Markham announced a contest for decorating classrooms for Halloween. Andy paid little attention, lost in his thoughts. He realized that perhaps agreeing to this nighttime excursion with Eni was a mistake. But it was too late now. He was the first to leave the classroom and headed to the locker room to change and wait for Eni at the school entrance. The cold autumn wind scattered orange-red maple leaves across the asphalt like bloody messages from the beyond. Andy could already feel his bones freezing when Eni emerged from school. Spotting Andy, she approached. Well, ready? Eni bombarded Andy with questions, as if darkness itself loomed. Not chickening out, are you? Ready. But honestly, I'm scared to go into the woods at night, Andy admitted. What are you afraid of? There's nobody there, just shadows and mosquitoes. Well, not even mosquitoes. The cold has frozen them. Eni tried to cheer him up. So, let's go to your place first. It's closer. You'll grab a flashlight and warmer clothes. It'll be even colder at night. And, perhaps, it's worth letting your parents know that you'll be spending the night at my place. As the friends walked home to Andy's, their conversation turned to Robert Stein's books. Andy had read them since childhood. His favorite was Welcome to Dead House. Surprisingly, Andy didn't feel afraid of the living dead described in the book. Horror stories for children. How strange that sounds, Andy thought. Peering into the darkness, they didn't notice how they approached the house. Andy opened the door and let Eni in first. She entered, greeted Andy's mother, who was sitting in the living room on the couch, engrossed in reading some culinary magazine. Hello, Mrs. Miller. Today Andy and I are going to my place for a sleepover. He asked for help with algebra, Eni said, stepping out of the doorway. Okay, go ahead, Andy's mother replied, without looking up from her magazine. Andy descended the stairs dressed in a black leather jacket reminiscent of punk style, but without patches or artwork. Andy tucked a small flashlight into his pocket, bid farewell to his mother, and stepped outside onto the street with Eni. At Eni's place, the friends had a wonderful time. They played Monopoly, hugged, laughed, and talked while listening to music on a vintage record player. Eni's mother brought them hot cherry tea, while darkness began to envelop the world outside. "It's time to go," Eni said, finishing the last sip of tea. "Mom goes to bed early, so we need to quietly slip out of the house." Carefully treading the stairs, so as not to wake anyone, the friends quietly dressed and left the house. The road to the forest was long, so they continued discussing Stein's books to pass the time. The darkness swallowed everything around, and the cold penetrated to the bone. Lanterns flickered weakly, leaving orange traces on the path. Andy and Eni stood before the very forest, as if before the gates of slumber. Fear gripped them both, but Eni, the braver of the pair, grabbed Andy's elbow, and they slowly moved into the darkness of the forest. The light of the city lanterns dimmed, unable to penetrate the thick veil of night, and Andy pulled out a flashlight from his pocket. The pale spot of its light only faintly illuminated the tree trunks. Caricatured shadows of monsters formed in their minds, but upon closer inspection, they turned out to be just branches. Holding hands, they penetrated deeper into the labyrinth of the forest, every rustle underfoot causing their hearts to squeeze with fear. "Look," Eni whispered, pulling Andy's hand and pointing into the darkness. Andy directed the flashlight where Eni indicated. The weak light failed to reach far, prompting them to approach. Gradually, the outlines of a house became clearer in the darkness. It was an old wooden structure with extensions and a small tower. What was a house doing so far from civilization? The flashlight suddenly went out, but it was enough for them to notice a silhouette in the window. Something tall, thin, and ragged stood in the window. Andy lowered the flashlight. They stood frozen in shock, gazing into the house. "Shall we go inside?" Eni whispered. Andy silently headed for the porch, not taking his eyes off the ominous figure. Eni followed him. The steps creaked under his weight, but even this didn't make the creature move. Andy entered the house, and Eni followed. In the room where the creature stood, there was only a clothes hanger, on which a curtain had fallen. It was unclear why it was hanging by the window. Reassured that there was no threat, they decided to return to the town. A school awaited them. As they left the house, Andy unexpectedly turned around. In the window of the second floor, two small red lights were burning. "Wait!" Andy halted his friend. "Do you see that?" "Where?" "Over there, on the second floor." The guy pointed to the window. "Maybe it's just reflections from the lantern on the glass," the girl suggested. Andy moved the flashlight away from the window, but the burning lights didn't disappear. "I'm not going there again," Andy declared. "Let's just observe," Eni proposed. Staring at the lights, Andy noticed how they vanished for a moment. Now he was certain that something was standing on the second floor of the strange house in the woods, watching them. "Run!" Andy shouted. Turning their backs to the house, the friends sprinted away. Behind them, there was the sound of shattering glass and a dreadful roar. Afraid to look back and see what was chasing them, the pair ran with all their might. Passing by the cliff, Eni stumbled. Her hand slipped out of Andy's grip, and she fell off the cliff. Andy stood in complete horror. Shocked, he leaned against a tree and froze, like a statue. The guy couldn't think of anything, neither about the approaching monster nor about his now dead friend. His mind was blank, devoid of any thoughts. Nearby, a branch snapped. Andy snapped out of his trance, slowly peering out from behind the tree. Andy saw the monster approaching him steadily. It was exactly like in his nightmares, tall and gaunt, covered in fur, its eyes glowing with bloody red, and its fur and skin hanging off its limbs, revealing bones, tendons, and dripping blood. Apparently, it had injured itself while breaking the window. Andy's vision darkened, and he didn't realize how close the monster had. The infernal pain pierced Andy's shoulder like a searing blade, slicing through his flesh. The creature tore his clothes apart, its sharp claws digging deep into his flesh as if they were iron spikes piercing soft wax. Andy, clutching his wounded shoulder, darted forward like a desperate fugitive fleeing from death itself. Step by step, he fought for his life, praying for the path to lead him back to the light of the city streetlights, where the darkness couldn't reach him. But his dreadful fate refused to release its grip on him. Toppling to the ground, Andy found himself lying helpless on the earth, the feeble glow of a lantern casting his vulnerable body into the darkness. Raising his eyes, he saw the darkness looming over him, its hungry shadows engulfing him. Weak and battered, he struggled to his knees, feeling the ominous gaze of the creature drawing near. His eyes, shimmering with desperation, met the merciless gaze of the bloodthirsty monster. The monster, majestic in its cruelty, descended ever closer, like the shadow of death ready to swallow him whole. Saliva dripping from its jaws, and blood spraying from its claws, enveloped Andy's face, shrouding him in a grim mist of terror. The light of the monster's eyes, shining like stars in the dark night, slowly closed in on Andy's face, as if anticipating the moment when its claws would tear his flesh apart. And then, in the final moment of agony, Andy woke up. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. I hope it left a lasting impression on you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Many more gripping, chilling tales await you.